I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at the text message from my father. Eric was coming home. My brother, who I caught kissing my wife Jessica at our wedding reception 4 years ago, wanted a family reunion. 4 painful years rebuilding my life, finally dating again, finding some peace. Now Dad insisted on dinner with both Eric and Jessica present. My stomach churned at the thought of seeing them together, flaunting what they stole from me. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how this family betrayal ended in a way nobody expected. The chime of my phone interrupted the steady rhythm of my sanding. I wiped the sawdust from my hands and read another message from my father. He was turning 65 next weekend and wanted the whole family together. I sighed, setting down the piece of maple I had been shaping into a cabinet door. My small furniture workshop in Portland had become my sanctuary since the divorce. At 33, I had managed to build a modest business crafting custom pieces that kept me busy enough to avoid thinking about Eric and Jessica. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. Dad knew exactly what he was asking. Eric and I had not spoken since I found him with Jessica at my wedding reception. The memory still burned like it happened yesterday. The 2 of them pressed against the wall behind the venue, his hands tangled in her hair, her wedding dress bunched up as she wrapped herself around him. When they noticed me standing there, Jessica looked guilty for about 5 seconds before Eric smirked like he had won some competition I never knew we were having. Another text arrived. Eric and Jessica would be bringing their son. They had a child. Something twisted in my chest. Quick math told me the kid must have been conceived while Jessica and I were still married. I leaned against my workbench, taking deep breaths until the tightness in my chest subsided. I finally replied that I would think about it. Dad immediately called. William Lorenzo Sr. had always been a force to reckon with. Even as his health declined in recent years, his voice carried the same authority it had when I was a child. "Sir, down for a minute, Lorenzo. I need to talk to you about your brother," he said. I was not a kid anymore, but something about his tone still made me comply. I sat on a stool phone, pressed to my ear. "Eric has done very well for himself in New York. That finance company promoted him again," he continued. "Of course he did. Eric always landed on his feet, usually on top of something that belonged to me." "That is great, Dad. I am really happy for him." My father paused, and I knew what was coming. "He is bringing Jessica and their boy. I want us all together for my birthday. It has been 4 years, son. You need to move past this. Move past this." My ex-wife and brother had been sleeping together while we were married. They emptied our joint bank account and moved to New York together, leaving me with a mortgage I could not afford and a wedding to pay off. "Dad, I have rebuilt my life. I have this business. I am dating someone new, Amanda. I told you about her." "Good, good," he replied dismissively. "Then you will not have any problem sitting at a table with them for one evening. For my sake." The manipulation was familiar. Dad had mastered the art of making his desires seem like reasonable requests that only a terrible son would refuse. "My doctor says my heart is not getting any stronger," he added quietly. "I would like to see my sons together again before." I closed my eyes. Low blow even for him. I know he had been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation last year, but his cardiologist had told us it was manageable with medication. Still, the implied mortality silenced my objection. "Fine. I will come. But do not expect some big emotional reconciliation." I hung up and immediately called Darren, my best friend since high school, and the only person who knew the full story of what happened with Jessica. "You are actually going?" Darren asked, after I explained. "Are you insane? What does Amanda think about this?" "I have not told her yet," I admitted. "We have only been dating for a few months. I do not want to dump all this family drama on her. Lorenzo, buddy, she needs to know what she is getting into with your family. Plus, you might want her moral support that night." He was right as usual. I promised to talk to Amanda, and hung up, returning to my sanding with more force than necessary. The familiar motions calmed me as I thought back to how things had always been between Eric and me. Growing up, Eric was 2 years younger, but always seemed determined to have whatever I valued. My toys disappeared into his room. The baseball cards I collected mysteriously ended up in his collection. In high school, he dated a girl I had been seeing just weeks after we broke up. At the time, I brushed it off as coincidence or typical sibling behavior. Now I saw the pattern for what it was. Eric defined himself by taking what was mine. I met Jessica at a friend's gallery opening. She was beautiful, confident, and laughed at my nervous jokes about the abstract sculptures. Our relationship moved quickly, and within a year I proposed. When I introduced her to my family, Eric seemed genuinely happy for me. He gave a heartfelt toast at our engagement party, hugged me with what I thought was brotherly affection. I was too blinded by love to notice how his eyes followed her, or how often they ended up in conversation when I was busy with other guests. The next day, I went shopping for Dad's birthday gift. I found myself in an antique store looking at wooden boxes when I literally bumped into Amanda. She was carrying a stack of small frames for her gallery. The collision sent them scattering across the floor. "I am so sorry," I said, dropping to my knees to help gather them. "I did not see you there." She smiled, her dark curls falling across her face as she crouched beside me. "It is okay. I probably should not have been carrying so many at once." We collected the frames, and I insisted on buying her coffee to make up for the accident. Over lattes, I found myself telling her about the upcoming family dinner. Amanda listened intently, her green eyes narrowing when I mentioned Eric and Jessica. "That is awful, Lorenzo. No wonder you are dreading this dinner." It was the simple validation I needed. Not advice or solutions. Just acknowledgement that the situation was genuinely difficult. "Would it help if I came with you?" she offered. I make an excellent buffer at awkward family gatherings. The relief that washed over me was immediate. "Really, you would do that?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Of course. That is what people who care about each other do. They show up for the hard stuff." In that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have found someone like Amanda after everything with Jessica. She did not need drama or games. She was straightforward and kind, in a way that still surprised me. The day of the dinner arrived too quickly. I spent the morning in my workshop finishing a small wooden music box for my father. It played his favorite Sinatra song when opened. The mechanics inside precisely calibrated after weeks of work. Whatever my feelings about the evening ahead, I still wanted to give him something meaningful. Amanda arrived at my house exactly when she promised, wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes more vibrant. She kissed me at the door and handed me a bottle of wine. "Liquid courage," she said with a wink. "You look great, by the way." I smoothed down my button-up shirt, more formal than my usual workshop attire of flannel and jeans. "Thanks for doing this. I promise we will not stay long." She looped her arm through mine. "Take all the time you need. I am with you every step of the way." The drive to my father's house took 30 minutes each mile, increasing the tension in my shoulders. Amanda chatted about a new artist she was featuring, keeping the conversation light. I was grateful for the distraction from my thoughts. We arrived intentionally late, hoping to minimize the time spent interacting before dinner. Dad's house looked the same as always, the colonial-style home where Eric and I had grown up. 2 luxury cars sat in the driveway. One I recognized as my father's sedan, the other a sleek sports car that had to be Eric's. Of course he would drive something flashy. Dad answered the door with a scowl. "You are late. Everyone is already at the table." "Sorry, I got caught up finishing your gift," I explained, holding out the wooden box. "Happy birthday, Dad." He took it without really looking at it. "This must be Amanda." "William Lorenzo Sr.," he said, extending his hand to her. Amanda smiled warmly. "It is wonderful to meet you, Mr. Lorenzo. Thank you for including me tonight." His expression softened slightly. "Well, come in. We are about to serve the main course." We followed him through the familiar hallway into the dining room. The moment I stepped through the doorway, I saw them. Eric and Jessica sat at the right hand of my father's empty chair at the head of the table, the place of honor. Jessica wore a silver necklace I had given her for our first anniversary, the pendant resting against her collarbone like it belonged there. Eric had his arm draped casually across the back of her chair, his wedding band catching the light. The table fell silent as everyone turned to look at us. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins watched with uncomfortable expressions. They all knew the history. They had all been at my wedding 4 years ago. Lorenzo Eric stood his smile too wide, too practiced. Little brother finally decided to join us. Little brother. He always called me that despite being younger, another subtle way of diminishing me. Eric, too, nodded stiffly. Jessica. She at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, her eyes darting down to the table. Hi, Lorenzo. A small boy, maybe 3 years old, sat in a booster seat beside Jessica. He had Eric's dark hair and Jessica's blue eyes. Something cold settled in my stomach at the sight of him. Living proof of their betrayal. Amanda squeezed my arm, grounding me. I introduced her to the table as we took our seats across from Eric and Jessica. My father returned to his place at the head, and the servers brought out plates of prime rib. So Lorenzo's still making tables? Eric asked after a few minutes of strained conversation about the weather. Custom furniture. Yes, I corrected. Business is good. Eric smirked. Must be nice working with your hands. No stress of corporate deadlines or managing a team of 30 people. My father nodded approvingly. Eric just closed a major deal with that tech company. What was it called? Teleran. Eric supplied. $20 million account. We celebrated by buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. Jessica smiled proudly. Show them the photos, honey. Eric pulled out his phone and passed it around the table, everyone making appropriate noises of admiration at the beachfront property. When it reached me, I glanced briefly at the screen before passing it to Amanda. That looks familiar, I said casually. Is that the same area we looked at for our vacation home, Jessica? Before you sold our joint property without telling me. The table went quiet. Jessica flushed pink. Eric laughed, breaking the tension. Ancient history, brother. We actually built it with help from selling that old place of yours. So, in a way, you contributed to our beautiful home. Thanks for that. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My cousin Daniel shot me a sympathetic look from across the table. Actually, I began, but my father cut me off. Eric has been very generous putting money aside for my medical bills, he announced. With my heart condition, the expenses have been significant. I stared at him in disbelief. I had been paying his medical bills for the past 2 years. Eric had refused when Dad asked him, claiming he was overextended with the new baby and house. I had the receipts to prove it. Before I could speak, Eric raised his wine glass. A toast to Dad on his 65th birthday. And to Lorenzo, he added with a smirk. Thanks for giving up such a wonderful wife. Best decision you ever made, even if you did not know it at the time. Jessica giggled, the sound grating against my ears. She leaned into Eric's side as everyone reluctantly raised their glasses. I set mine down, untouched, and stood up. Thank you for dinner, Dad, but I think Amanda and I should go. My father frowned. Sit down, Lorenzo. We have not even had dessert yet. You are being dramatic. That word, dramatic. He had used it throughout my childhood, whenever I expressed hurt or disappointment. When Eric broke my science fair project the night before judging, when he took the money I had saved for a car, when he kissed my girlfriend at my graduation party, I was always being dramatic for having feelings about Eric's behavior. Something snapped inside me. 4 years of rebuilding my life after their betrayal, of therapy sessions, working through my trust issues, of nights spent wondering what I had done wrong. All of it crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I am not being dramatic, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I am setting boundaries. Something I should have done years ago with all of you. Eric rolled his eyes. Here we go with the self-help jargon. Jessica. Remember how he used to read those psychology books? Thought he could fix everything by talking about feelings. Jessica nodded, laughing again. He wanted us to have weekly check-ins about our emotional states. Can you imagine? Their mockery hung in the air, as my relatives watched, in uncomfortable silence. Amanda reached for my hand under the table, a silent show of support. You know what, I have something to say before I leave. I continued, looking directly at Eric. You have been taking things from me our entire lives. My toys when we were kids, my baseball cards, my college girlfriend, my business ideas that mysteriously became your pitches at work. He shrugged, unconcerned. Not my fault if you cannot hold on to your possessions, or your wife. Jessica at least had the grace to look down at her plate. I turned to the table at large. Did any of you know that I found them together at our wedding reception? While guests were still eating cake, I caught my brother and my bride of 6 hours having sex against the wall behind the venue. Gasps and murmurs spread around the table. My Aunt Margie covered her mouth in shock. Lorenzo, that is enough, my father warned. No, it is not, I continued. Did you know that Jessica emptied our joint account the next day, $42,000 we had saved for a house? Did you know they had been sleeping together for months before the wedding? Eric stood now too, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I could not tell which. You are just jealous because she chose me. She always wanted me. Tell them, Jess. Jessica remained silent, suddenly very interested in her water glass. I pulled out my phone, hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I still have the text messages, I said, from before the wedding. Want to see how long this affair was going on. Want to see what they said about me. My father stood now too. That is enough. I will not have this at my birthday dinner. You knew, I said quietly, looking directly at him. You knew about them before the wedding. Did not you? The room went completely silent. My father's face drained of color. Dad, my cousin Daniel asked. Is that true? My father sank back into his chair. I did not know they were, that they had. But you knew Eric had feelings for her, I pressed. You encouraged him to pursue her anyway, even after I proposed. He did not respond confirmation enough. Eric laughed, but it sounded hollow now. Dad always knew I was the stronger son, the one who deserved more. The words hung in the air, shocking in their naked truth. All my life I had suspected my father favored Eric, but to hear it stated so plainly was another betrayal entirely. Dad, my Aunt Margie whispered. How could you? I looked around at my family's faces, seeing the shift in their expressions. No longer was I the dramatic one disrupting dinner. The truth had a weight, all its own. You want to know the funny thing? I said, my voice calm now. I built my business from nothing after losing everything. I designed every piece, worked 18-hour days, slept on a futon in my workshop for a year while I saved enough to rent an apartment. I did it all myself. I turned to my father. And I have been paying your medical bills for 2 years. Every treatment, every medication. The ones Eric refused to help with because he was too busy buying vacation homes with my money. Gasps around the table again. My father looked stricken. Eric scoffed. You have always been pathetic, Lorenzo. Playing the victim. No wonder Jessica could not stand being married to you. I did not bother responding to him. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. Then I placed my father's gift carefully on the table. This music box plays Sinatra. Your favorite, I told him. I designed and built it myself. Took me 3 weeks to get the mechanics right. My father stared at it, then at me, something like regret crossing his features. I turned to Jessica next. I forgive you, I said quietly. She looked up surprised. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying this anger has been exhausting, and I am done with it. Then to Eric, whose smug expression had faltered slightly. I do not forgive you. Not because I cannot, but because you have not asked for forgiveness. You have never built anything of your own, Eric. Everything you have you took from someone else. I pity you for that. My phone buzzed. I turned to Amanda. Our ride is here. She stood composed and elegant. It was nice meeting everyone, she said politely. As we turned to leave, my cousin Daniel stood. I will walk you out, Lorenzo. In the hallway, he hugged me tightly. I did not know, man, about any of this. I am so sorry. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. I refused to show inside that house. Your dad has been staying with us sometimes, Daniel whispered. Just so you know, he has been saying some pretty concerning things about Eric's business practices. You might want to look into that. I filed that information away to process later. Thank you for telling me. Outside, Amanda's friend waited in her car to drive us home. As soon as we closed the doors, something broke inside me. 4 years of contained pain spilled out in shuddering sobs. Amanda held me against her shoulder, saying nothing, just being present as everything I had kept inside finally escaped. The ocean always calmed me. After we left my father's house, Amanda drove us to the coast an hour away. We sat on the hood of her car, watching waves crash against rocks in the moonlight. My body felt hollow after releasing years of pent-up emotion, but somehow lighter too. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Text messages from relatives who had witnessed the confrontation. Apologies, expressions of shock, offers of support. I ignored them all for now, focusing on the rhythm of the tide instead. I cannot believe I did that, I finally said. I have dreamed about confronting them for years, but never thought I would actually do it. Amanda wrapped her arm around my waist, leaning her head against my shoulder. I am proud of you. That took incredible courage. I do not feel courageous. I feel exhausted. She nodded. That is how it works sometimes. Standing up for yourself takes everything out of you. But you did it. You told your truth. I thought about Eric's face when I called him out, the shock in Jessica's eyes, when I offered forgiveness she had not earned. Most of all, I remembered my father's expression, that mixture of shame and regret when his favoritism was exposed to the entire family. We stayed by the ocean until after midnight, talking intermittently, comfortable in shared silence. When we finally drove home, I felt something had shifted inside me, like furniture rearranged to create more space. The following week passed in a blur. Eric and Jessica left town earlier than planned, according to my cousin Daniel. Family members I had not spoken to in years reached out, sharing stories of Eric's behavior they had witnessed but never mentioned. It seemed my confrontation had opened floodgates of truth. My father tried visiting my workshop twice. I was not ready to see him yet, asking my assistant to tell him I was out. Instead, I channeled my energy into my work, completing 3 custom pieces ahead of schedule. The familiar process of transforming raw lumber into something beautiful and functional had always been my therapy. Amanda surprised me with news that a major gallery in Seattle wanted to feature my furniture in an upcoming exhibition. She had arranged it secretly, submitting photos of my work weeks ago. You did this for me, I asked when she told me over dinner at my place. She smiled. I believed in your work before I knew your story. Now, I just want everyone else to see what I see in you. 10 days after the disastrous birthday dinner, my doorbell rang at 7 in the morning. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking older and smaller than I remembered. The confidence and authority that had defined him throughout my childhood seemed diminished. Can I come in? He asked, voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I stepped aside, allowing him into the small living room of the house I had bought last year. It was nothing like the family home, but it was mine, paid for with my own work. I need to tell you something, he said once we were seated. I have cancer. Stage 3, pancreatic. That is why I wanted the family together for my birthday. The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, he was still my father. How long have you known? I asked. 4 months. The doctors give me maybe a year with treatment. I nodded, processing this new reality. Is that why you invited Eric and Jessica? Some kind of deathbed reconciliation? He sighed heavily. Partly. But also because I have been thinking about my life, the choices I made. The way I treated you and your brother differently. He paused, struggling visibly with what came next. I always saw myself in Eric, he admitted. The ambition, the willingness to take what he wanted without apology. I thought that was strength. I encouraged it, even when I should have disciplined him. And me? I asked, needing to hear him say it. You were like your mother. Thoughtful, creative, kind. I did not know what to do with those qualities in a son. I did not value them the way I should have. The validation was bittersweet, coming so late. And under these circumstances, I am not asking for forgiveness, Lorenzo. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did not see then. You are the better man. You always were. We sat in silence, the weight of his confession and diagnosis filling the space between us. Finally, I stood and went to the kitchen, returning with 2 mugs of coffee. I cannot promise to forget everything that happened, I said, handing him a mug. But I can try to move forward knowing what I know now. He accepted the coffee with a nod of gratitude. There was one more thing. When I was going through some old paperwork for my will, I found these. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded set of papers, financial statements from the joint account Jessica had emptied, bank records showing a series of transfers to accounts in Eric's name dating back months before the wedding. I did not know about this part, my father said. I knew he had feelings for her, but I did not know they were stealing from you too. Eric told me you had given them money to start their life together as some kind of twisted blessing. I studied the papers, feeling strangely detached. The theft had devastated me financially 4 years ago, but now it seemed like evidence of how desperate and small they both were. Thank you for showing me these, I said simply. My father stayed for another hour. We did not resolve everything, could not undo decades of favoritism in one conversation. But it was a beginning. When he left, he hugged me tentatively, the first embrace we had shared in years. Over the next several months, our relationship slowly repaired itself. He started visiting my workshop regularly, eventually asking if he could help with small tasks. His hands were still strong, and he took to sanding and finishing pieces with surprising dedication. We talked while we worked, filling in the gaps of years spent distant from each other. Eric called once during that time. His business was facing an SEC investigation for financial irregularities. He wanted money advice, connections to lawyers. I listened silently to his request, then told him I could not help. Not because I was holding a grudge, but because I had learned the importance of natural consequences. Jessica sent an email months later, a long confession about her relationship with Eric, how it had begun with flattery and attention when she felt insecure in our marriage. She mentioned he had cheated on her twice, now that she sometimes wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. I read it once, then archived it without responding. Her journey was her own, now separate from mine. Amanda and I grew closer through it all. She understood that my past had shaped me, but did not define me. When I showed her the financial documents my father had given me, she suggested donating the equivalent amount to a foundation supporting young furniture makers, transforming the loss into something positive for others. A year after the confrontation at my father's birthday dinner, my business had grown enough to hire 3 assistants. I had a 6-month waiting list for custom pieces and had been featured in 2 design magazines. My father's health was declining rapidly, but he still came to the workshop when he had the energy, watching with pride as I taught my techniques to my new employees. One evening, he brought a small wooden box to the workshop, similar to the one I had made for his birthday. Inside was my grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom he had always promised to Eric as the eldest son. "I want you to have this," he said, placing it in my palm. "It belongs with someone who understands the value of time, of making something that lasts." I closed my fingers around the watch, feeling its weight, the history it carried. When I was a boy, I used to sneak into his dresser drawer just to look at it, fascinated by the intricate mechanism inside the craftsmanship that had survived generations. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken between us. I was not the son he had expected, but I was the son he needed in the end. And perhaps that was enough. Looking back now at the journey from betrayal to healing, I realized the most valuable thing I built was not my business or the custom furniture that carries my name. It was my own sense of worth, constructed piece by piece, like the cabinets and tables I create. Each painful experience became raw material, transformed through effort and time into something stronger, more beautiful than before. The last time I saw Eric and Jessica was at my father's funeral 6 months ago. They stood across the grave, separate from each other. Eric looked hollow, the investigation into his business practices having cost him nearly everything. Jessica held their son's hand, her expression unreadable. We did not speak. There was nothing left to say. Amanda stood beside me, her hand warm in mine. We were engaged now, planning a small ceremony on the coast, where we had sat that night, after the confrontation. She wore a ring I had designed myself, a simple band of silver with wood inlay, unique like our relationship. My father never got to see us married, but in his final weeks he told me he was grateful for the time we had reclaimed. He died knowing the truth had finally been spoken, that cycles of favoritism and betrayal could be broken. It was not a perfect reconciliation, but it was authentic, built on honesty rather than pretense. I think about him often, when I am in my workshop teaching my assistants the importance of patience, of respecting the natural grain of the wood rather than forcing it into shapes it resists. There are lessons in craftsmanship that apply to life, to relationships, to healing. Work with what you have. Honor the flaws. Build something that will outlast you. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you thought you could trust? How did you rebuild afterwards? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more authentic stories of healing and growth. Share with someone who might need to hear that pain can be transformed into something beautiful. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the most important things we build in this life are the boundaries that protect us and the bridges that connect us to those who truly deserve our trust.